Everyone, to the February 11th, 2020 Redevelopment Agency meeting. Let the record reflect that all members are present. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance with Board Member Blair.
Yes, please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. So now we have approval of minutes. We have the closed session of July 30th, 2019. Board Member Lopez.
Yes, Judge O'Rourke, that is correct.
And the special meeting of July 30th, 2019, and special meeting of August 20th, 2019. Board Member Heyer.
Yes, Chair, they're correct.
Special meeting of September 3rd, 2019. Board Member Stevens.
Yes, Chair, they're correct.
Special meeting of October 1st, 2019. Board Member White.
Yes, Chair, I've read those and they are correct.
Special meeting of October 22nd, 2019. Board Member Nadolski.
Thank you, Chair. They're correct. And make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Board Member Nadolski, a second by Board Member Lopez to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. So now we'll have reports from administration. We're welcoming Brandon Cooper to give us a Redevelopment Agency annual report.
Chair, members of the board, good evening. Thanks for having me on the agenda so early tonight. My wife and children appreciate that. Thank you. As is customary, it's my pleasure to present to you the annual RDA report. This report is for fiscal year FY19, which is July 1st, 2018 to June 30th of 2019. You should all have received one of these, hopefully there at your position, so you can refer to it. And I've also handed out another sheet that we'll discuss here momentarily. So before we get into the details, just a refresher on some of the acronyms that are part of this discussion. Here are what has been described as the old economic development areas. You can see that over the years they have been named a number of things. I won't cover those. You've seen them before, but just as reference as I refer to some of the differences in the names of the areas. Right now, we use the term community reinvestment area. And that's been the latest term over the last couple of years. It really hasn't changed in state law very much. There's two forms of it. The vanilla form, so to speak, is the designation of an area that does not include a blight study, nor does it include eminent domain. And the taxing entity participation is done through interlocal agreement. It's no longer done through a taxing entity committee, which is what it used to be under the old URA and RDA laws. There is an option for CRA with eminent domain that does require a finding of blight and a blight study. It's an approval for the first 5 years, and it has to be done through the tax entity committee as it was customary before. Just for a reference, we have established two CRAs. Two CRAs, one CDA, and one EDA in the last 8 years, and none of them have included eminent domain. So it's not something that we customarily do unless there's a strong reason to initiate that. So that's the breakdown of our current condition as of this report. We're currently managing 18 areas. As I mentioned, there's a CDA, a couple of CRAs, 3 EDAs, a URA, and 11 RDAs, and those RDAs are usually of the older type, pre-1990. This is just a quick diagram of our most prominent tool, the reason in most cases why we would initiate a redevelopment area of any kind, and that is the use of tax increment finance. And as you see there, it's really the difference between the value of the property at the time of creation and the value of the property after there has been additional investment made into the property. Tax increment is not a new tax to taxpayers in the area or outside of the area. And it's not the use of a blanket taxpayer dollar, meaning tax increment finance is usually a rebate of the incremental value that's generated by the developer or owner of the property of their own paid taxes. So it's generally not consumed or used from other taxpayers. So I think that's an important clarification to make. There's a lot of confusion about that sometimes. So as of this report, we've seen the sunset of 2 districts, American Can and the 25th Street District. And when I'm back here next year, we'll be talking about the sunset of those districts. So we have a lot of, out of the 18, we have a lot of old districts, and we're seeing them expire as we go forward. The most exciting one certainly is the Defense Depot Ogden District. That is the BDO. And I'll talk about why that's so interesting here in a minute. So this is hard to read. I understand. I've handed this out to you. This is just a tracking sheet that we use that goes over all of the areas that we have now and have had in the recent past. And we just take a snapshot with the current tax rates and the current valuations just to look at how we're tracking in terms of maybe what the project area plans indicated when they were established. And it gives us an idea of how much the individual taxing entities would receive if all of those things expired in that same year based on those tax rates and those valuations. You can see, I don't know if this is a pointer and you can see that, but anyway, under the snapshot total, total as of tax year 2019, you'll see that under the city column, we have already received about $647,000 from the areas that have expired since 2015. If all of those areas were to expire today, based on today's tax rate and the current valuation, we would receive $2.8 million. And so that's kind of an idea of how these things are flowing. That changes from year to year because the tax rates change and the valuations change. And so we just try to track that. Next year, we'll add to this list those other areas that will expire, and we'll have a better idea of what type of new tax revenue will hit the general fund of the city as a result.
Will you go back to that slide one really quick, Brandon?
This one here?
I see that the golden links, we'd get $114.
Correct. Don't
Okay.
spend it all in one place.
Okay. Not on that one, the one before with the expired ones.
Right, and that's a good point. If you'll notice that most of the districts that have been established in the 1980s are usually our most underperforming districts. The one that we've established since 2000 certainly and since 2010 most definitely are some of the most best performing districts that we see. And another thing that's important is that for the most part, we see a 2 to 3% annual appreciation just generally for properties outside of an RDA. You'll notice that we're exceeding, in some cases, 1,000%. I think the BDO area is an anomaly, but generally properties inside of an RDA, especially those of recent creation, perform much better than properties outside of an RDA.
I also have a question. Do you mind if I interrupt for a moment?
Go ahead.
In the little document, on a couple of them, it says, that the tax increment may only be used for recreation center purposes. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? I mean, I understand what the words mean, but what does it mean in this context?
So I think we have 7 or 8 districts that had an original expiration date, but were extended under a law that was passed some years ago to allow for tax increment in other districts to be used for recreation bonds for, in our case, the junction, but it's essentially from one district to another. So we have
it's all going to the junction?
We have 7 or 8 districts that are contributing to that, and they'll expire as they are set to expire, and those are the things that are helping us pay for the junction bonds.
Hey, Brandon,
Thank you.
on the list that you have up here with Lester Park and Park Boulevard, expiring in 18.
Mm-hmm.
How come we have to wait till next year for the revenue?
The report by statute is on a fiscal year. Our tax to increment collection is on an annual year, a tax year.
Calendar.
And so what you're seeing is a reporting that's not aligned with how we're collecting. So we're actually collecting the tax increment
Okay.
from districts from tax year 19, and you'll see that some of these have expired already. So really, we will have increment flowing to us a year after their expiration.
Okay.
I think the other interesting aspect is if you go to the school district for BDO, they will be receiving at the conclusion of that almost $3.5 million.
Right.
And that-
Because
and
of
then
the tax rates of the individual entities, the school district benefits, 3 times almost from the city and the county.
And the county receives a little over 800,000. So
Right. The county receives a little bit more than we do in most cases.
even though we've gone to them and says, if we mature these properties, this is the potential that you'll have for growth. And that.
As I mentioned, we've established a number of districts in Mayor Caldwell's administration, and during that entire time, the school district has been a wonderful partner to deal with. They see kind of the vision, they understand what you're seeing here, that the rate of growth for properties inside redevelopment areas is much greater than the rate of growth outside for properties outside. And so I think they see that, they buy into that, and they're a willing participant in most cases.
Jerry, I have a quick question. Are there benchmarks that you try to aspire to have a annual growth percentage, or are there benchmarks throughout any statewide, countrywide?
I don't know of any, and I don't know how a benchmark could be applied because each area has different goals and objectives in the area, and then each property is so different in terms of its redevelopment potential. What we do look at is what we anticipated at the project area plan creation. So we would pro forma some of that growth, and we would look at the individual projects that we anticipate happening in that project area. And so over time, we can kind of gauge based on our expectations and anticipations, but I don't know of any general benchmark that we can apply that would make any sense. So here's a couple of areas that I just pulled from that big spreadsheet to highlight some of the successes. Again, BDO being the biggest one, that kind of thing doesn't happen all the time where the federal government grants you 1,400 acres and you can take the taxable value from 22,000 to 561 million. However, it's interesting to note how we got there. There was an original $12 million bond that was initiated by the city that was invested into the area. There was a tax increment, there was a lease proceeds reinvestment period of 7 years after that. And then there's about $70 million of tax increment that has gone back to BDO. So really there's a substantial investment and a substantial vision that caused that investment to happen to get us to the $561,000. That's also happened in the Ogden River area. There was some initial investments made there. Certainly Trackline is of recent memory. And the American Can had a large group of folks participating in that to get to see success in that area.
Brandon, Chair.
Please.
One more question. Thanks. Do you track the amount of city incentive or subsidy for within each district so that
We do in some of the newer ones, most especially. The older ones are not as much, but the ones that we've created again in the last 8 to 10 years, we do. It's on a separate kind of spreadsheet, but we want to compare at the end of the day our leverages compared from tax increment, how we leverage tax increment versus how we leverage tax increment plus any other equity sources that might be from BDO lease revenue or general fund.
Oh, yeah. Is that information we could be privy to?
bet.
That would really help with, for me to contextualize the investment and what it leads to.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're thinking the same way because leveraging tax increment is a different animal than what it would be with, say, BDO lease revenue.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thanks.
So, looking back over the last year or so, we have some pretty awesome accomplishments that are fun to talk about. The creation of the Continental CRA, which is essentially the 26th Street alignment, half block to the north, half block to the south from Washington to Wall Avenue. The largest opportunity in that area is the what we call the Wonder Block, the old Continental Bakery. We have torn that down, and we have been working diligently on a redevelopment plan that is looking like it's going to come in at about $170 million if we can pull all of the component parts together. So that's going to be one of the biggest project, if not the biggest project the city has seen thus far, and we look forward to launching that here in the near future. Trackline, the Ogden Business Exchange is moving along as we have planned. Right now there's 2 projects being built. Enable Utah's new headquarters there, that's 120,000 square feet, and Ogden's own new headquarters, both local companies. Ogden's is about 30,000 square feet. So we look forward to those opening in the summer of 2020, bringing new people to what used to be, as you know, if you recall the old stockyards, a pretty sketchy place where no one wanted to go. We hope that we'll see anywhere from 300 to 500 new people working there when it's completed.
Can I ask a quick question? I should know this, but I can't think of it in my mind right now. For something like Enable Utah, which is a not-for-profit, right? Do they pay city taxes?
Not all not-for-profits are tax exempt.
Okay.
In this case, Enable Utah does not because they have a waiver granted to them by the county.
I'm just curious.
So the way that has worked, if you recall that the developer gets the taxes for the duration of the tax increment period. And so that's not something that the city is going to see
Right.
A negative impact from. But they are vacating a building
Right.
in the Ogden Industrial, which would free that up from tax exempt to taxable. And then it's already under contract to be bought by Golden Beverage. And so that goes on the tax rolls while this property does not.
Oh, yeah. And
It's
I
not
love
quite a wash.
not-for-profits. I'm not trying to, I was just curious.
Well, it was a big deal for us because once we learned that the developer was under contract with these folks for that, it was kind of a shock, but it all kind of works out at the end.
Because of the other property. Okay.
Yep. I'm just going to let this picture sit with you just for a minute. The SWIFT has been an amazing experience, and as you recall, EPA came in April of 2019. They finished in November of 2019. They removed 90,000 containers. 20,000 of those containers had hazardous materials in there that had to be dealt with. There were another 20 or so thousand containers that had just junk in it that could go to the dump, and then the remaining containers were empty. So they were very helpful in removing what could have been a massive public health and safety issue. In fact, we're dealing with bigger issues beyond the cleanup of the building in a leaking underground storage tank on the west side of the building. Had we not got into the property, removed that tank, and identified the issue, then that tank could have been leaking into the river for who knows how long. So we're in the process of doing that, and once that's finished, we'll commence with the remaining portions of the demolition. Also at Trackline, the Roosters Brewing Company opened. That's at the at the intersection of B Avenue and Exchange Road. They're doing quite well. They manufacture and ship out of that facility, and there's also a small restaurant if you haven't been there. Another thing that has taken a lot of our time, though not entirely a redevelopment agency activity, it does include most of the things that we are focused on as an agency. That is the downtown master planning process. We started that in January of 2019, and that should culminate here pretty soon. Just a plug for that, we will be having a public engagement workshop on February 26th at the Conference Center. That's open to the public, and that will give everyone the opportunity to see all the work that has been happening since January. We've been in input mode since then, and now it's time for us to share kind of the results of that input. So all of you hopefully have received an invite by now, and we hope to see you and the rest of the public there as well. The Riverbend Project area is seeing new construction with the Ogden River Brewing company. That's being framed right now, and so that'll be done this year, and you'll see that. And the year of the demolition. So you're looking at the Ogden River Inn. On my left, your right, in the center there is the Continental Bakery demolition. We've also torn out the Courtyard Inn and are now working on filling the hole back up. And the bottom right is the Millstream Inn, about 15th and Washington. Part of our strategy is it's a two-pronged approach, remove impediments and focus on and leverage bright spots. In this case, demolition was necessary in these areas because these projects presented an impediment to growth and success. So that's why we chose to engage in the many demolition activities of this year. And going forward, these are the four kind of buckets that we're focused on. The downtown master plan will be applied to all of these things and will govern development in these areas and other areas going forward. But those are the four areas that we are focused on and will continue to be focused on. And those are some of the projects that we hope to progress and potentially see come to fruition in this next reporting year. And that's my report. Thank you.
Any questions?
Brandon, on this report that you gave us, it talks about current participation rate. What does that mean?
When you establish a project area, the taxing entities have the ability to participate from anywhere from 100% down to 0. And so those participation rates reflect the percentage of participation from the other taxing entities.
Okay.
Any questions? Well, I have a question. I think I've asked you this every year. I've been here now, but so lots of folks get really worried about how many of these areas we have, and like what is the tipping point for when we have too many, et cetera. I mean, do you want to speak to that at all?
Similar to the benchmark thing, there really is no formula for that. It's based on the strategy of the city, what our goals and objectives are as a community and what we want to accomplish. Redevelopment areas are a tool that clearly work. I think we've proven that. And when done right, it can bring about significant change that really the marketplace isn't able to do on its own. So my answer to that question is always as many as necessary. And as you see, we are losing a lot of our older districts by the end of next year. If we don't institute any more, we'll be down to, probably 13. And so as you move along, things are always changing, and just like any problem, you try to apply the best solution as possible. And when redevelopment areas are applicable, then we seek to institute as many as necessary.
Chair Jaburka, just a point of clarification. I believe there is a state law that limits the total amount of RDA
There used to be.
numbers you can't. Oh, it's not there anymore?
Yeah, they took that out, I think, 2 sessions ago. There used to be a 10% cap, so you couldn't have the valuation of all of your RDAs exceed 10% of the valuation of your city.
Oh, okay.
But I believe they took that out. I'll double check on that, but that's my off-the-cuff response.
You would probably know. And did you have a question? I feel like I don't.
Sure.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Please.
Brandon, would there be, I'm just looking at the new revenue to the city. First of all, we should clarify this is annual revenue. It's not just one time.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
And then, but would there maybe be some wisdom in having fewer but better RDAs? I mean, the DDO is a clear success story, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the ones we're going to lose are really small. Golden Links are $114. Wall Avenue, $913. So is there some discussion in your industry about how maybe we can multiply the magnitude or the impact if we had fewer of them and we're more willing to forego some TIF You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Again, I'm not ever worried really about quantity. I'm worried about effectiveness. And I think that's been on our mind for the last 10 years as we have looked at some of these old and aging districts and wondering, did they fulfill the purpose in which they were created? And, a lot of our districts, again, were really kind of usurped to pull the tax increment into the bonds for the junction. I think that's a good thing that we did that. But as those go away, we're really going to be left with hopefully the most productive and valuable districts. And as we go forward as an agency board and as staff, we always look at, again, identifying the right problem and creating the correct solution for that problem. Going forward, we're looking at ways that we can reduce not just subsidy to developers, but also the amount of participation at the area level, right? For instance, do we always have to participate at 100% at the area level? That's always a consideration at the kind of participation and incentive agreement level. But in the case of the last couple, we've seen some of our entity partners that have only wanted to participate at 80 or 90%. I don't ever think that should be a policy consideration, but it should certainly be a consideration during the discussion of the creation. By not participating 100%, then you leave some of that increment available to you to do other things with, most importantly, public infrastructure around the district and other things that might come as a cost because of that district. So there's all kinds of considerations. And I would like to say that we have looked at the mistakes or maybe some of the challenges or lessons that we have learned in the past, and we haven't repeated those. We're doing things a little bit smarter.
I have a quick question. So a portion of the money collected goes to housing. Can you,
In some districts, not all.
Can you describe that? And then the second part of that is, are we only focused on these areas and putting housing back into those areas, or are we using it in other non-CRA areas?
That's a good question. So the statute today says 10% minimum. We actually choose 20% in all of our districts because we see housing as a major component to our strategy and initiatives. It goes into a separate housing fund that's managed outside of the RDA general fund, so to speak, and outside of each individual project area fund. And it is for housing citywide. It doesn't have to go back into the district from which it came. It can be applied to housing projects anywhere in the city. And it's actually a contributor to the Quality Neighborhoods program. So you all, as the city council, funded the Quality Neighborhoods program for 5 years at $1 million a year. And the RDA housing money goes into that program to augment those funds.
Thank you.
And Ward's done a tremendous job managing all that, and he's given a number of presentations to show the impact of those funds and the leverage that he gets, and it's amazing.
Chair,
Yes.
I have one more. I'd like to go back to the participation rate. Is there a reason why when we contact these developers that they don't participate 100%? And if they only participate, say, 70%, are we losing 30%? Or how does that work in that aspect there?
Well, there might be two questions there. Let me see if I can break them apart. The participation rate is the amount of taxes that the entities like the the Ogden School District or Weber County is willing to contribute to the redevelopment agency for the duration of the district. That defines the participation rate. As an agency, we then have the ability, as we collect that distribution at whatever rate it might be, from 0 to 100, then we have the ability to incentivize projects. And we have a set of criteria, an application for that. And sometimes we do incentivize projects at 100% level. Other times we don't. For instance, the latest project that you all approved was the Hilton True Home 2 Suites project. And I believe that was an 80% incentive, which means that they're going to create 100% of new taxes and they get to keep 80 and we get to have 20 pass through to the agency as unrestricted funds.
Okay.
One more.
Please.
On the table again that you're on, is this the annual growth percent on the far right? Is that a cumulative percent of growth total, or is it really annually it grew by 58%?
Yeah, so if you plug into that cell, it's essentially the difference between the base value and the current year value divided by the number of years that it's been in existence.
Okay.
He's doing some figuring over there. So
Just-
you have
I've been-
additional
Yeah.
question.
No, I one more comment though, because I know you want to get home to your family. So before you do,
We're in this together.
before you go though, a gentleman walked in named Devin Hubbard, who is a local real estate agent and developer interested in work here. He works out at the gym and asked me some of these questions, and I deferred them to you. So hopefully you guys can connect, because I don't know answers to a lot of the questions he's got. So
Sure.
I just want to say that because I know you're trying to run out afterward.
No, I'll stick around as long as I need to answer questions.
Thanks, man.
Other questions from board members? I have one final question, which I know I've again asked this one before, but when will we be done doing this work, do you think? I mean, when will this, need to help to incentivize developers in this way? When will we meet that goal where they'll just want to come on their own?
That's a crystal ball question that
I'm looking to you, Brandon.
Yeah.
Give me the answer.
I can't answer that definitively. I can give you some anecdotal evidence of what's happening. Number one, I think the business environment is such that corporations and developers have been trained to get these incentives, and as long as the competitive marketplace will continue to offer those, we have to at least consider them to stay relevant. Because folks will go where those incentives exist, regardless of other considerations in most cases. And then also, I think that you're seeing some things changing right now. If you look around town, there's a number of projects that are being constructed that don't have any public subsidy in them. They're by right developments that are usually authorized under the current zoning that don't need additional incentives from the city. And most of these are apartment buildings, and that's because our market right now really is supportive of that product. The size and type of things that we're trying to accomplish and the degree to which we're trying to move the needle isn't possible from current market options, right? There is no developer out there that has the ability or the willingness to contribute financially to the things that we're trying to do because the returns aren't there. They can't justify them. So equity has to be brought in various forms, and that equity buys down the basis and increases the rate of return. And so I think we're kind of in the middle of that, where the largest, hardest projects are still going to need lots of incentive. Some of the small, easy, more supportive projects are happening without it. We're seeing some commercial buildings being built without incentive. They're largely, again, just the things that are the low-hanging fruit, 7-Elevens and little strip malls here and there. The large mixed-use, really complex projects that have parking associated with them. Everything you're going to see as new initiatives and guidelines being proposed under the Make Ogden Downtown Master Plan, all of those things will need some support. And again, it's great because it's not a new tax and it doesn't come out of your pocket per se as a taxpayer. It comes out of the pockets of those who are willing to make the investment.
Sure. Well, I wasn't trying to undermine your work. I was just curious.
It's a good question, and I don't know, essentially.
Great.
One more. I just want to tell you where I'm coming from with my questions. I'm just trying to figure out how much of the growth would have happened without participation or incentivizing. So that's why I was asking if we had a column that had the amount of incentive and we have the rate of participation, but we don't have the amount of participation that we provided in each district either. The amount of TIF participation.
Right.
So we have the rate, but not the amount. So
Exactly.
those
So
are a
you
couple of
can't-
things for
yeah.
context for me that I'm having a hard time piecing it all together without.
Yeah, and we track that separately because that's a big job, and we don't do every district like we do here. We just do key ones that we want to keep track of. But you're right. We want to make sure that the investment levels are in line with what the district allows for, because most every district has a budget in place with a cap, and so we want to make sure that we allow for all of the projects that are predicted in that area, and so we track that separately.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to share that.
I would love to. That would, to me, would give me a better sense for success and
Yeah.
to be able to quantify success.
Yep.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks. And I think we get it sort of on each individual project at different times, but having it all together might be handy to compare. Because you often report that to us or tell us how much is left, but it's just not all in the same place.
Thanks.
Good?
One more question.
No problem.
So in a lot of
I have a
these
question.
situations where we have developers coming in, are we having the developers actually do the putting in, new sewers and pipes and all of that within that? I'm just using the Twinkie or the Hostess building. And the reason I'm saying that is that sometimes we need the RDA and their money in order to be able to do the upgrades to the infrastructure that's underneath. And are we still in making the developers responsible for that?
So generally, on-site infrastructure improvements are the developer's requirement. Off-site, so anything outside the boundaries of their project in the streets, generally, those are more difficult. And usually when you tally up the cost of a project and you look at the cost versus what the returns or the revenues are, that creates that gap. And so how we fund that gap and what's in that gap analysis really could be whatever. But the larger that gap, the less feasible the project becomes and the more public incentive would be requested. So putting in public infrastructure could work. It's just something that we'd end up essentially paying for in some cases because it just grows the gap. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so we're constantly looking for equity sources to bridge that gap. That includes tax increment, but would also include other sources. BDO lease revenue has been one of the most significant contributors to that. In the case that we're talking about now, we're hoping to create scenarios where we can meet that gap for the project-related costs and then hold back some of that revenue that the project creates, still allow it to be feasible and move forward, and then use that additional revenue to fund public infrastructure. The Make Ogden plan is going to show us a pretty significant amount of public infrastructure that will be necessary to achieve the goals that we've indicated as a group. And so we'll need tax increment to help pay for that. So it's a fine balance because if you burden it too much, it just doesn't happen and you don't get anything.
Chair, could I make a comment
Please.
to Councilmember White? I think there's two valid perspectives at play. And I think you and I are on the same perspective where we're just trying to total how much public investment is involved, whether it's a direct investment here or something indirect. Like the 26th Street, I think, is a perfect example of the huge CIP that we do have on our plate right now that would facilitate the Twinkie development. Mm-hmm. And that comes at a big price tag, but how much of that price tag goes into this? Because we're looking at the total amount of new revenue to the city on an annual basis, and she and I think, are trying to figure out how much is that costing us to get that revenue. How long would we have to project out to make sure that we break even and come out on top? You know what I mean? So there's valid perspectives.
Yeah, 26th Street is the perfect example of what we're talking about, where if you don't fill that gap enough, then the project won't happen. If you fill it too much, then you don't have any money to put in the public infrastructure that's necessary. So we're looking at an 80 to 95% participation right now and trying to tweak the project cost so that we can get into that
So that
target.
we can do some of that, yeah.
If we can do that and still get the project feasible and desirable for the developers to perform, then let's say that project turns out to be $170 million. The aggregate tax rate, which is the combined between the three entities, applies to that, and 20% of that comes into the RDA General Fund, which then could be used for in-project area infrastructure costs. So we're working with the engineering guys to try to balance all of that.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And thank you.
We are hoping that we can start using more tax increment for infrastructure investment over time.
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
For sure.
And as these values continue to increase, that really helps us because that's kind of the burden that these projects face is high construction costs, but low rents, low revenues, low returns. So the floor is too high and the ceiling's too low. And when people see the margin in between that, they choose to
build somewhere else. But at the same time, the need is immediate, and the payout, if 100% participation, is so far away that we can't Right. realize the services we need to.
That infrastructure
Hence
need
the-
is there with or without the project.
Yeah.
So-
But hence the 80 to 90% participation rate would allow us to
Right.
provide some services in the
Yep.
interim.
Brandon,
I like it.
what is the vision or the philosophy or the reasons for creating these CRAs where they are at now versus going more towards maybe the northern part of the city, looking at some other areas where we don't have them as much?
We felt that from a strategic standpoint, the downtown was the heart of the city. And the highest real estate values are generally in the downtown. So if we can get the downtown kind of at a level where it was operating effectively, then we could look outside of the downtown to the shoulder areas. And that's been on our mind for a couple of years now. If you go from 18th to 12th Street on Washington, that's a pretty significant area of decline. Same thing from 26th to 32nd on Washington. So those areas that shoulder the downtown would be kind of the next ring that we focus on. We don't go much up on Harrison around the university because generally that's a different market condition up there. And so things are happening up there differently than they happen here. So we would look to the shoulder areas of the downtown and then probably north as we go to 5 Points. That area is really struggling. We've got a number of mid boxes that
But
are closing.
we're not there, right?
We're not there. You can see on the map on page 2 or 3 that the downtown's almost entirely covered with these areas.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of now looking at where to go next and why.
So I know that there are 2 council members here that live on the northern part of the city, and my colleague there is smiling at me. So
We like
just curious, and in future conversations, advocating for maybe more interest in
Sure.
that side of the city.
I can tell you this year we'll be focused on the Gibson area, so from essentially 17th to 12th, and then depends on how things work out, but then 5 Points is really kind of our next next look. We also have
It's a good call.
an area that we haven't really paid a lot of attention to, but it's from Wall Avenue going west along 12th Street. It's called the Century District. We haven't
Let's
shared
spread the
that.
love.
Yeah,
Well,
I hear you.
Yeah, but I also think that there's that Minicozzi study that really shows where the impact of the dollars come from too. So
Right.
True.
Don't want to dilute it, but
yeah,
they are all in Cherokee-Burke
downtown.
district, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now it's become
I've
personal.
only been here 2 years, so
Great questions. Thank you so much for your support. We're doing
Thank you.
wonderful things, and I hope that this report is evidence of that.
Brandon, I'm encouraged with the report of looking at 12th Street and 5 Points because we do have some vacant buildings there that need to have a little bit of touch up. I'm thinking of the Wainscott's Market, and now Ridley's going out of business, and then we had Shopco. So we do have some flexibility along those lines that if we look at those possibilities, what can we do with these areas? I know 14th Street where the KFC was located and Millstream Motel. I know that's under contract, but we need to look and see how we can develop those entities along those lines there and spur more activity and life into the area that we're looking at.
I agree. We're working with 3 or 4 owners at the 5 Points area right now to figure out what we can do with that place.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brandon.
Now we have time for public comment, and this is an opportunity. I'm sorry?
We have to accept
I
it.
guess we have to accept it. Okay.
We have to-
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm moving on.
Ralph Price, 636.
So sorry, Ralph.
Hold
We
on a
need
second.
to actually
Sorry.
vote on this first, but you
Oh,
stay right
okay.
there. Okay, stay right there for a minute.
In order to get to Ralph, I will go ahead and make a motion that we accept the report.
Accept it.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Vice Chair Blair and a second by, I think it was Board Member White. And this is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. Now it's time for public comment. I apologize to
All
Ralph.
right.
This is an opportunity to address the board about any concerns or ideas on any topic.
Okay, first of all, the good things. Glad to hear you talking about. Thanks for bringing that up, Stephen, for our area over there, and you for going ahead and remember, because I'm on the committee. So the nice guy stuff over with. Phew, I'm pissed at you right now, Mikey. You too, Mr. Johnson.
Let's stay civil, Ralph.
Okay,
Let's
here
be
we
polite.
got to the activists like myself out there as we do, and we have done amazing work with the homeless over here. We've done amazing work with people that are suffer challenges and stuff like that. One of the first things that we have in our weaponry is the Lantern House, the overflow. And there is 90 people there. The night before last, as cold as it was, 30 of them kids, 78 last night. And one of the things that the city has done is they're talking about closing the doors of Lantern House overflow on March 1st. It is so cold out there, I challenge you to go stay outside at the night, or put your kids out there, or else go ahead. You won't see your animals or your pets out there. And I know, because my hours is 11 to 3, I do travel up and down these roads. You guys, Ben and Louise, and you guys have walked with me. By the way, hires, report on your $100. We went to $22.50 went shipping people to Lantern House. Then it was 5 kids involved in that. We had chance to be able, Motel 6 gave us a cut rate. We had 2 beds in one room and everything, and half of the cost of a regular room. Twice, right there, $31. We had 3 different families, 17 people we were able to help with that right there, and to do that shipping. But we shipped them to the Lantern House to be in the overflow. Us out there on the streets, one of the things that we can only do to promise these people that have these challenges, they'll come out of drugs, they'll come out of alcohol, they'll come out of this diverse situations, is that we care. Ogden cares. City cares. The mayor cares. And everything. I promised them that. They trust me now. These guys have walked with me before. They said, Ben's comment was, you sound like a movie star out here. I said, no, I'm a friend. They believe in me. They believe in things. So I'm adamant right here. When I had a meeting with Lauren yesterday, she does amazing work for the little bit of money she gets. Big props to the arts girls back there, because $2,000 twice a year goes to that right there. And we got people. I want you to remember that it is not a kitchen floor. It is not. It's people. It's kids and everything. It's cold out there. I know, because I'm out there doing and trying to go and facilitate, so they have self-esteem again. They have belief again. They have trust, so that they can go ahead and they can do what they need to do, become productive members again. 51 people we put last month into places. Big job, Mike. Good job. All right. But it started with us that are out here doing the little things. And we got that Lantern House. Just because it is a kitchen floor doesn't mean that it's nothing. It's the first thing of a home that some of these kids have saw. And it's the first place to be able to come back together enough as couples so they get their kids back for some other people. We've got to find a way that March 1st, those doors can't close. If we can move that back to maybe June, that's a May, where it's a more inclement weather is not so bad, and we don't have to worry about them freezing, and that'll surely help, and that will surely do a thing. Now, I talked with County Commission earlier today, and bam, they're going to do for long term, but for short term, we need that door to stay open. We got to have that floor.
Thank you, Ralph. I don't know if the mayor would like to make a comment.
Sure. It's not an RDA issue, but it is an issue. And one of the things that came up with that is that's not all on Ogden City. Our fire department has to go look at safety of life that's in there. Health department needs to look at safety of the food that's being served in there and everything else. The architect that originally designed that building said, with the design that was in there, our fire guys could only approve about 260 people, which they're averaging. We've gone in and redone that, so now we can do 333. So we've jumped that up, the occupancy load up a ton, but it's a health department issue and a life safety issue for those that are sleeping on the floor in the kitchen right now. As they reconfigure what's going on in the Lantern House, they'll be able to accommodate those people so they don't have to sleep on the hard floor. But it's a health department issue, not just in Ogden City saying, hey, we're not going to approve this or anything else. It's not my decision.
You just push that date back so it doesn't happen March 1st.
And we had a conversation with them last week about that. We're willing to sit down at the table and work to accommodate that. But I think you're getting some misinformation if you believe we're just going to shut the door and disallow them. We've found...
Big Five Sporting Goods is willing to donate 100 mats to put on the floor. So we put some mats there on the floor for them so they don't have to be directly on the floor.
And that's great. But we're having these conversations now, and that was never intended to be a hard firm. We're going to lock the doors and not let anybody in. We're accommodating that. We had a meeting with both, with Lauren and Jay just, I think it was last week. We had to sit down with the police chief, the fire chief, and everybody to address some of the life safety issues that came up.
Ralph, maybe you could speak to the mayor after the meeting.
All I said is using warehouse.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? Welcome.
Hello. Angel Castillo. I wanted to address the RDA board about some of the things that happened during the work session, because this does come under how we're planning for the city. As a planning commissioner, the South Ogden plan that came before us, we were told that we would see that again. And that is the only reason you got a unanimous vote on that, because we had all of the same questions that you had with regards to the number of ADUs, with how we were going to enforce that, what it looked like overall. Those were all questions that we wrestled with, and we were told that, well, this will come back. This isn't final. So I highly support
Board member.
I'm not. You're not council member here.
Yeah, board member.
Thank you. Board brain
it.
freeze. Board member hires sitting down and having a work session with the planning commission to further discuss those. Your issues are our issues, and while I am, I'm very pro accessory dwelling unit, as many of you had pointed out during the work session. It's not the one answer. Answers to housing is a multi-pronged approach. There is no silver bullet that's going to fix it. It has to be a cumulative strategy, and it needs to happen together, which is why I think it's really important that we address these ADU issues, because they're part of a bigger strategy with regards to student housing, with regards to just in general housing along a transit line, with regards to changing lot sizes, unit sizes, so that they're smaller, so that they can be built more affordably. It's really important that we don't get stuck on wrestling with just one issue, that we can't do this, because we need to have all of them if we're going to make a dent. We're not going to solve the housing problem. The best that we can do is control the flow of it. And this is a big part of it. So I think it's important that you sit down with the Planning Commission and that we talk through these things before we make a decision. With regards to just ADUs in general, I took a couple of notes that I think it's really important when the community pushes back and NIMBYs are like, not in my backyard, we don't want density. ADUs are an easy, small portion of soft density, because when you're, they're bottom-up, decentralized, incremental, scalable, and adaptable. And when you walk through a single-family home neighborhood, you don't see the ADUs there behind it. That is the best way to have a controllable amount of minimal impact around people. If you turned around and you asked that community, would you like a 400-unit apartment building? Everybody would lose their minds. But we still have to accommodate for growth. It's a state issue. It's a county issue. And we're talking about it in session right now. We need to address these things, and we have to look at these small incremental things that we can do to move the needle. And I highly suggest that you speak with the Planning Commission to talk this through before you vote on anything for South Ogden. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Everybody's watching you, Margaret, to see if you're coming forward. I'm sorry, you didn't mean to call you out. Looks like we can close public comment. Any comments from Executive Director?
Sure. Just a huge thank you to Brandon Cooper and the staff that work on this. Redevelopment is a lot harder to get accomplished than just development. So you look at Lehigh and Farmington Station, those are pretty easy. When you've got hundreds of acres of bare dirt, you can go start to work from. When you're looking at taking down old infrastructure, upgrading old infrastructure, infrastructure that wasn't planned for these kinds of projects, these guys are some of the most creative in the state, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments from board members?
I have a quick comment, if I could, and I just want to address, and I know Ralph's comments in the RDA probably aren't the appropriate, but I do want to say, and I will advocate that the mayor and Ogden is represented in homelessness talks. We were just in a meeting yesterday talking about how to try to figure out how to get funding. And so, the mayor is down advocating for more money from the state, trying to figure that out. The second thing is that it's not a cheap endeavor, and it's not without issues. Salt Lake opened an emergency shelter. It was not an easy endeavor. It's 24/7 fire and police that are there. It's it's just not as easy as just opening a shelter. And so I do want to say that the mayor is doing quite a bit, and it's that even though it doesn't seem like from Ralph's comments, but he is doing a lot of work for us and representing us. So thank you.
I'd add to that too.
Please.
I know Ralph really well. Ralph knows how much I love him. And I love and appreciate, as does the mayor, the work that he does on the street for people. Because he really is, out there talking to people and serving others and helping others. And he's doing it with a really abundant and open heart. And that's something that we can't have enough of. But what I fear is missed in an exchange like that is that this isn't just politics. We're all people. Our mayor is a person. He's a good man. He has a good heart. He would not want to hurt children. He would not want to keep children from having a warm place to sleep. So there's passion from Ralph for good reason, and there's passion from our mayor for good reason. And both want to serve people, period. So I hope that everybody who might see that exchange would not come away from here thinking that one side's right and the other is wrong. That both sides are right, because both sides love people and both sides want what's best for people. And both sides want beds for kids. That's all there is to it. So,
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any comments?
I just want to echo what has been said, but I would even want to add, even as me being known for advocating for really open and free expression in our chambers, but I would hope that exchange to me felt like maybe was inappropriate for our chamber. So hoping that maybe we can watch that more next time.
I've seen a lot.
Yeah. Coming from me.
Yeah, no, I know. And yeah, we all want to make sure that we're civil with one another and kind and not calling out names, etc. Agreed. And I think, I do deal with these issues in my day job too, and they're very, very complex, and there's not one solution that's going to fix these issues. And we certainly all want to do what's best for the community and figure out how to do that together. And Ogden does take quite a brunt of the service operating in the northern region. And not that we don't want to do more, but we do need to think about that too. Great. Anybody like to adjourn this meeting?
I would like to make a comment if I could.
Oh, please. I apologize. I thought I already asked you.
You kind of did, but I am happy to get this report on the redevelopment agency. It's really good. Ogden finds itself in a situation that we're largely built out and have some dilapidated buildings here and there. This RDA is a real savior for us. As Councilmember Lopez alluded to earlier, north end of town probably is needing some help soon, and I'm happy that it's on your radar. Sorry to see Ridley's go. I guess we wish we knew what it was that causes these things to happen, but either way, I think we need to do something to kind of help. Doug's been bringing up the old Fred Meyer spot for a long time. That's a key intersection in our town. Chopco and just a lot of things north end of town needs some help. So let's focus. So let's see if we can help that.
It's true. It's tough. I think that those retail operations are really having a lot of challenges staying
Well, they are,
afloat.
and I think it's because of the nature of things changing. It's we got to rethink things. look around for best practices, what is working in different places and things like that. But because things aren't going to be the same. They're not going to be like they were 50 years ago. Those times are done. So.
True. Thank you.
And I will motion to adjourn.
Doug, it looked like maybe you had something to say.
Well, I was
I'm
going to
sorry, now I
add to
feel
what
like I haven't
Rich
answered
is
properly.
what Rich
I'm
has
sorry,
said
Doug.
is that I was in retail for 40 years, and when I started, where it is today is an entirely different type of situation. A lot of these businesses do online products, but I think we're to a point where, and I think Brandon and Tom and his area department is very creative, is that they use Ogden's resources so that they can get the best out of what we have. There are areas not only in the north, but there's areas in the south. If you go down Washington Boulevard to the south, there needs to be a lot of touches through the south end of town. But they're creative enough where they can look at these different projects and maybe come in and develop a program that will be beneficial. I'm looking, comes to my mind, Monroe and 24th Street. I'm sure that's on their radar, and they're willing to, and they're looking at how they can develop those areas. But it's not a quick fix, is that they have to look at the developers and look at those individuals coming into the city or those in our city that would like to do something positive and creative. But they have to look and see, does that really fit the area that they're looking at? And that is a real challenge. But they have the know-how and the talent to maybe look at that and say, this part fits, but this one doesn't. And this is what we're going to do. Doesn't. It's nice to see that the KFC Millstream Motel is under contract. And if you go down that way, hopefully there'll be a new project going in there within the next couple of years. So.
What you're actually also reminding me of my, big statement I'm always saying, to shop local. And I think, things change and times do change and people shop more online, but that's something we need to think about is the more we do that, the more likely our local businesses will not be able to survive it. So got to sort of think about convenience versus supporting our local folks. Great. Okay. Is there any other comments? I want to make sure everybody has had their chance. Okay. Thank you.
I will make that motion to adjourn again.
Thank you, and thank you for waiting. So we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. A motion by Board Member Heyer, second by Board Member Nadolski. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So now we're going to reconvene another meeting. Okay. This is the special City Council meeting of February 11th, 2020, and let the record show that all council members are present. We are very excited to welcome the League of Women Voters for recognizing their 100 years, and I believe Councilmember White is going to read that recognition for us.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just want to say that if you look at the faces out there, you recognize them because they're like at almost every event, right? And they put on events that many of us have participated in, and they've been very instrumental in getting the people in our grand city to register to vote so that they could at least vote for us or against us, I guess. So I'm excited to read this recognition. The Ogden City Council and Mayor proudly recognize the League of Women Voters for providing invaluable contributions to the Ogden community. February 14th, 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. Recognized for molding political leaders and shaping public policy, the League of Women Voters has been instrumental in creating a more perfect democracy. The League's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion has had a significant community impact. Founded by Carrie Chapman Catt in 1920, the League of Women Voters has active membership in all 50 states and more than 700 communities. Luckily, ours is one. The organization encourages all citizens to actively participate in government at both local and national levels. We are grateful for the contributions of the League of Women Voters and for the thousands of women who engage and contribute to Ogden's political spectrum. We wish the League success for many years to come. And with that, I'd like to offer this recognition presented on the 11th day of February 2020.
Thank you. We have the President, Terry McCullough, here to accept.
Come on up.
Come on up. I also neglected to mention I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, so in case there's any conflict.
There's a conflict there?
In case there's a
be
conflict.
the picture.
Political engagement.
You want to run down the front?
Yeah, you have to be in there.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Warm my head. Warm my head.
Thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. How are you? Great. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Yep. How you doing? Thanks for being here. Thank you. Yep. And you've made it all the way back around. Yep. Thank you.
So now we'll go over here to take a photo if you guys don't mind.
Okay, have you pulled your stool out? Because I'm pulling mine out. Wait.
It would never be done.
I'm not.
I got something to say.
No, I'm good now. Yeah, I'm good. Ben's usually a hard time about my self-esteem. So
Right here's great.
no problem. I got no problem. I'm gonna go like this now.
Thank you. If you'd like to say something, please. You can just talk about the league a little bit and go for it.
Off I go.
The
The National League of Women Voters was started 100 years ago, and the Weber County League of Women Voters started in 1963. And some of these people have been here since 1963, probably me. And we appreciate the support that Ogden City always gives us. Everything that we ask for, or anytime we ask for you to hear what we have to say, you do it. So thank you so much for that. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that advocates for people to vote, to be educated. We had a presentation last night on homelessness. It was awesome. And people should come from the community and hear, what kind of problems are out there, because some of us don't get to see that. So pay attention to the paper, and if there's other ways, I try to do emails to you guys. If you see something you're interested in, please don't hesitate to come. It's not just for women. It started out being for women because women got the right to vote. We thought we should educate ourselves. But men are involved as well. So please feel free. Thank you so much for recognizing us. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for all of your work. I just got my ballot in the mail today for the primary, so just get out and vote. Now we have the approval of minutes. We have the strategy session of September 17th, 2019. Councilmember Heyer.
Yes, I've read those minutes and found them to be accurate.
Thank you. And joint work session of October 16th, 2019. Councilmember Lopez.
Yes, Chair, they're correct.
And joint work session of October 22nd, 2019. Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, Chair, they're correct.
And finally, work session of October 29th, 2019. Councilmember White.
Yes, Chair, those are correct, and I propose that we approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember White, and a second by Councilmember Nadolski to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. Now we have a report from the administration on the Arts Ordinance amendments, and I believe we have Lori Buckley presenting for us.
Oh, no.
Oh, she's so fast on that. I saw you earlier on that. You could do a performance. Yes.
I can do tricks on this. Good evening, council members, council staff, and Mayor and Mike. I'm Mark and the Mayor. Thank you for having me here today. Sorry. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Arts Ordinance Amendment, the third one that has come in a succession of three different amendments to the Arts Ordinance. This one is to ask for your consideration for adopting proposed ordinance 2020-4, which is a proposal to actually amend the ordinance language for project support grants to match our standard practices of funding individuals, organizations, and business entities, regardless of whether or not they have 501c3 nonprofit status. So to just reverse a little bit, to remind you of how we got to here, in the fall of 2018, we began the process of updating the Arts Ordinance. And on June 11th, you adopted the first part with ordinance number 2019-23, which was to change the allocation of public art funds from enterprise funds into BDO revenue. And with that change, we also added the minimum and maximum cap for the public art fund. And then in September 3rd, we brought forward the ordinance 2019-42, and that was adopted. And that created some new funding mechanisms, which was the minor public art projects, public art on private property, and the creation of the special art grant. A note as to that special art grant, it was requested by council when we created that we provide policy on that, and that has been created and included with this packet for your review, and I hope you guys got a chance to look that over. So we're here today to actually just correct the language of the ordinance. We have continually been funding nonprofit organizations through project grants. It looks like to me when I did the research on it that we used to have three types of grants, and I think it changed in 2015. And as far back as I can see is 2012 with my records, there was general support, project support, and developmental funds. And the development grants were the ones that were the available for small organizations that were trying to get going, which is what we're hoping to continue to do with the project support grants. When the management of the art grants were brought back into the city, they amended the Arts Ordinance in 2015, and that was Resolution 2015-41, and it was adopted on September 1st, 2015, and that actually merged project and development support grants into just one grant. So we only had the two, general and project support. So, but what it looks like is that ordinance language was not fully corrected at that time. So this is actually just what we're here to correct, that language in the ordinance. Do you have any questions about?
Questions?
And I'm sorry I missed work session. I was out with surgery, and I would have been there to explain it to you then. So,
Just want to make a comment. I hope your wheel's okay. I don't know how it happened, but I tried to warn you about dunking on the playground basketball court.
I know I need to be a little more careful.
Hope you learned your lesson. Yeah.
Yes.
Councilmember White, did you have a comment?
No,
Sorry.
I'll just let it. Oh,
Okay.
I may have a question afterwards.
Okay.
Any questions over here?
I was just wondering, are we attracting more of the local artist organizations coming and participating? I think that's the real fruit of what we're trying to produce here, is that we give the local residents and the artists the opportunity to grow.
Yes, actually each year we see an increase and actually a more diverse group of people that are applying for art grant funds, especially in the project support area. And we've seen a lot of smaller organizations and individuals actually apply for grant funds to reach into communities that we are having a hard time reaching into with our programming. Tribal Love Dancer, for example, has applied multiple times for funds, and she does a lot of work with the Congolese refugees and does last year she applied for a grant and did African drumming and dancing workshops and traveled around to all the schools and educated the children on African culture and the dancing and drumming, and they got to do that with her. And so these small grants that we have available are really impactful to our community, and it's really nice. We actually, Ogden City is a pilot city. Like, we have a lot of other cities that have actually contacted us about how we grant our money and are looking to form their granting processes after how we do ours. So it's a really good program.
Thank you.
I do have a question, Chair.
Please.
Just I'd start with a comment and a question. I bet when a few years ago when he took the job, he said, "I want to go be the art coordinator so I can go to the council meetings."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and do this public speaking stuff that I'm
I know.
really good at.
This is the kind of contribution I wanted to make is at the council meetings. But I work in wildlife, and that's a topic that people are really passionate about. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's really fun to work on something that people care a ton about because I share that passion. But it means that there's a lot of scrutiny too.
Yes.
So personally, I'm sorry that we scrutinize everything so much, but this is just something that so many of us are passionate about.
I understand.
For 501c3, most of those organizations start off as an individual or a couple people that are just trying to scrape it all together and get their tax documents together and so on. And that takes a ton of work to get to that point of maturity, to get to where some of those groups are. How do we distinguish? Like, in one side, I see that we can maybe branch out, and we have been anyway, to offer more art and to get more art on the streets and maybe cultivate more artists in our art community by broadening it. But how do we also provide for maybe the leg up for those that have done the legwork to get to the point where does that make sense?
It does make sense. I feel like, of course, the project support grants are available to both 501c3s and people who don't have that. So it seems our general support grants tend to go to the larger, more stable organizations that have been running Imagine Valley Theater, Eccles Community Arts Center, Treehouse Children's Museum. Like, they're staples in our community, and the small amount that we grant them, they would still exist without us. These project support grants, and actually, now that we're seeing so much more ask, like last year we had almost $200,000 of ask and then only $100,000 to grant, which is a good thing. They become competitive, but also it becomes really difficult to cut out so many of these amazing proposals that come forward or reduce the funding amount that we're trying to give them, because we're trying to help so many of them and reach into each different group and community. So the only way I could see is potentially in the future looking at increasing grant funds, because we do have a really strong subcommittee that works really hard and combs through these applications really well and makes sure that the project and the person applying for it's high quality program. We know that they're going to be able to pull it off, and we can see what they're spending those funds on. That's very important. So that's really the only way is keeping this happening and maybe potentially looking down the road to increasing those grant funds a little bit.
I do. Oh, go ahead. You're going to go ahead.
Well, then I'll be done. I just view this, those are like the smaller nonprofits that are applying for these smaller grants. I would venture to guess there's far more pounds of sweat and passion behind it than there are dollars that go behind those groups. And so that energy in the arts community is I'm not an artist. I recognize art and the beauty of art, but I really recognize the fire and the passion that art brings from the people that bring us the art. And so I asked that question because I feel like my votes on these issues are just small contributions to the stewardship of that fire and that passion. So I don't want artists to feel like whichever way we vote, one way or the other, that I just want everybody to feel like there's a fair opportunity to express themselves and to contribute to that, because to me it's just priceless, and I don't want. That's why I get so touchy about arts things. I don't want to hurt that dynamic. So.
And if we don't foster these small organizations to grow up into these larger, more stable organizations, eventually the larger ones that are here might eventually be done with what they're doing or close down, and then we will be lacking in these strong arts-based organizations that produce our treasured programming that our community, really benefits from.
My question was just around the business entity, because I understand the difference between those, but can you give an example of a business entity that's not a not-for-profit?
Yeah.
That might have gotten funded in the past?
For example, Wasatch Coffee Roasting applied for grant funds to create Originality Art Gallery, and that is programmed every First Friday Art Stroll during the warmer months. I think they only don't program it in like December through February, but the rest of the year they have poetry readings, live music during First Friday Art Stroll. They're continually bringing in artists and repainting that alley so it's fresh and it becomes a destination point for people who are, it's posted all over the internet. People are come looking for that and ask for that. So that's a perfect example. So they use those funds to create an art space that's used by poets and musicians and then, of course, visual artists.
Yeah, I was just curious because that was the one question someone gave me, and I thought, I'm not sure. Yeah. I trust the expertise of the arts.
But it is
to wade through that. But I was just curious.
Projects like that, or mural projects.
Or just other ones that you would.
Let me think. Gosh, I should have brought my list.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just curious. So there's like this sort of space that's open to everybody and things like that.
Yeah. Kristen Mitchell Art Studio she's a small LLC. I don't know if she's considered a business entity, but she does these projects where they're doing drawing of movement of art, and so there's people that can come and watch, and they're doing live figure drawing of people doing yoga or dance moves, and then this artwork is actually displayed. So there's quite a few different things that are happening, small businesses and organizations that are doing these amazing small projects that they're not actually, they're not doing it for any other reason than to have benefit to the community.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr.
Please.
Chair, I would, in a few weeks, we're going to go into the budget session. I think it'd be well worth our time to maybe review and see if there's anything in there that we could actually increase the amount of grants that we would put into the arts. We get far more money back or talent back and feelings in the community than what the amount that we're spending. There's far more benefit for the community in addressing the arts. It's called creativity. It's called being able to lift someone's expectations and maybe goals that they may not ever have, but it's an opportunity for growth of a lot of our citizens. And so that may be an item that we'd want to maybe look at during the budget session.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to accept public input on this item. If you'd like to come forward.
Don't you have a backup beeper on that?
Please state your name and speak for 3 minutes.
Alicia Washington, heavily involved in the arts in Ogden. I think it was an interesting conversation tonight. Thank you, Lori, and to the whole arts team that presented. That the conversation shifted from the distinction of for-profit, nonprofit to individual and business. And so with how the wording is, people spoke much more passionately about the work that the individual was doing versus the work that the business was doing. The business seems to apply for the grant and then bring in the one person that's going to work on that arts endeavor versus the individual who seems to be much more impactful when they receive the funding alone to go into, like Lori talked about, the schools and the education that they're going out, and the work is going to maybe more inclusive It involves more inclusivity and more diversity when it comes to the patrons or to the people that are participating in that project. So potentially maybe the wording needs to be reexamined versus it's not a business entity that can apply for these project grants, but maybe it just sticks to an individual when it comes to the project grants. Thanks.
Any other comments? Input? And let's see if there's anybody else. I don't think anybody else is moving, right?
Nope.
Yep.
No more public input.
I just want to respond to Alicia's comment, which I do agree. We do have several individuals that apply for these grant funds. But if we cut out the small organizations that are applying for these funds, we're cutting out these small organizations that we're hoping to foster and build up into a nonprofit organization. So taking that away, I think, wouldn't be, moving in the right direction. It's actually stepping backwards from where we're trying to get to.
I see what you're saying. I don't think that's, I was just going to clarify. What I heard, and I'm just, a person, so I may have misheard. I think what she was saying is, I don't know how it would work maybe in the alley scenario since that's somebody's property they're working on, but like if the person wanted to paint that space or do that poetry, applied and got the funds, that would be different than the business entity then facilitating that. I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah.
I think, well, it sounded like she was saying just having them available to individuals, but I'm just making sure because a lot of our small organizations, the proper way, for example, comes to mind, applied for grant funds, and they're an LLC, so they're a small business organization. They're not a nonprofit, but they applied to do the podcast about all the Ogden music scene and have been recording and putting those out there. So that is...
Right. And it's my understanding, I'm not a contract or business person, so just my caveat. Some LLCs are very low profit, though. So I think there's different levels of LLCs. Does anybody know about this? I think that's just my understanding. Sort of, there's different kinds of LLCs, but
I don't think that matters the way it's written, though. I mean, it doesn't say.
Right. My
0 to
original
million.
question was actually trying to think: is there some established business entity that would apply for these grant funds that actually could just do it? I'm just trying to think through what kind of business entity would we actually include? Because I do feel like there's probably some I'd be like, no way would I, because they have their own money. I mean, they're a business, so they're for profit, so they have extra money to then give back to the community. So I guess that was my clarification too, is like, what kind of business entity are we talking about?
And it's usually these very small, like Wasatch Roasting Company or The Proper Way.
And I'll just clarify too that we use the word business entity to encompass both nonprofit and potentially those that are organized differently, like an LLC. It could be any kind of a corporation under Utah law. But the whole idea of the projects grants was to make them as broadly available as possible. They still have to go through the same rigor that any grant, but so we used individual, organization, and then business entity. We're broader than what the county would allow under RAMP, for example. So we're really just, as Lori said, just trying to promote those small organizations that are not, whether they're whatever type of business entity, individuals that don't have an opportunity for funding in our community otherwise.
Yeah, the application process is pretty intense that they have to go through to show what the project is they're doing, how many people are benefiting, how many artists are benefiting. It's not they can just say, well, I have this idea and give me $2,000,
Right. No, and like I said, I do trust the process.
Jared, can I ask one?
Please.
Because I think this did not go through the Arts Committee, right, for consideration or...
They're aware of this. They didn't actually have to vote on it because it's just a language correction to match our standard practices. So they didn't actually vote on it, but they have been informed continually as this went forward.
Okay. I don't know if... I always like when the Arts Committee has reviewed it because it's probably a really good forum for that kind of a back and forth.
Yes.
I did. I wasn't expecting the nature of that comment specifically, but I think that does kind of get to what I was getting at with the people wanting to make sure that the money's going to the right place. There's not a lot of it, not a lot of
Exactly.
money, but we have more and more artists going for it, which is great. But
Yes,
I guess for me, rather than like getting to the project and saying, are you an LLC or a 501c3? I hope that the committee, and I would count on the committee, they'd say, what is the quality of the proposal? What is the impact to Ogden and to the arts community, et cetera? And since we've been operating in this way in the past, it would be along that same context of that, that passion and purpose and not wanting to violate people's commitments, that I would hate to pull the rug out on some of those they've already contributed to. So it's not really kind of a bummer, but
I agree. And that is what the subcommittee and the Arts Advisory Committee want the focus to be on is, how is this going to impact the community? How are we benefiting from this? This is how they want to look at these applications, not trying to figure out what type of business entity they are. And that's just.
And there are funding reporting requirements for any of the
Yes.
grants.
Yes.
oh, sure. Yeah.
Yep.
What's that? Sorry.
There are reporting requirements, so they have to submit the report of how the funds were expended, no matter what their project is and no matter what type of entity it is.
In the beginning, they submit their project proposal, a full budget, and then we only release half of the funds. And then after the project is complete, they do have to submit a full report with a full budget accounting for all the funds and what they use them for.
So we don't look at the kind of the financial need of
Oh, yes.
the organization making the request.
They have to, of course, an application that comes forward that doesn't show need, it's usually not funded. We've had actually 2 that came through last grant cycle that their budget didn't show a need, and so it didn't move forward we didn't put money towards it because they showed a great project, but their budget didn't show a need. They didn't show any need for the funding. They had enough money to do it on their own.
Okay, so that is
they submit like a whole.
that is an important criteria.
Yes, very
good,
important.
good. Okay.
Chair Chaburka, if you don't mind if I
Please.
just jump in. So before you this evening, and I think Lori's done a really good job at giving all the context behind this, but is a really simple text amendment in the ordinance, and it's to modify from allowing these grants for project support to be awarded to individuals or organizations, with the caveat that the organizations that are awarded would have to have that 501c3 nonprofit charter status. And so it's removing that requirement, and to Mara Brown's point, broadening that to business entities. And so that's really the only thing we're looking at this evening. I think the context is excellent, but I just feel like we're getting a little bit off track. So.
Are there any safeguards to potentially balance the number of grants that are going to private businesses versus nonprofits or individuals?
There really haven't been a need for that because we get a good mix. Actually, we tend to get the least amount of business entities applying. It's more individuals and small arts-based organizations that are applying. And so we haven't had to actually create any policy for that because it hasn't come up. And usually because it has to be a project, it can't be, so general support funds just go into the bucket. So it's like, we just give them the support check, and it can be spent on sheet music or, ballet coaches or whatever, because they continually produce excellent high quality programming and, year after year. So we know that. So those ones are nonprofit, and we know that when we put that money into that bucket, that's what they're spending the money on. The project support grants it isn't something where they can just take the funds and it goes into the bucket and they buy coffee beans with it or whatever. It has to show specifically what they're using the funds for, how many artists they're hiring, how many community members are, benefiting from this, what their outreach is. We ask them to do outreach and they have to provide, are they going into schools? Are they providing professional development? Are they teaching lessons? Are they creating a scholarship for, underserved people in the community. So I don't know that it's necessary at this point. We haven't, because the application process is so tight and how we look at what they're using the money for, we haven't needed to.
And it looks like Councilmember White has.
Oh, sorry, I was looking this way.
Sorry. I need everybody sitting on the same side. We got to change this.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? And I can't remember all of it. So it's individuals, businesses, and organizations. Does a municipality fit in any of those definitions?
Organization
Government entity.
fit under organization.
It's for an Ogden, it's Ogden based. So are you thinking of a external municipality that may want to do something in Ogden City? Or
Ogden City themselves?
We have.
I think she's playing with us because it's late.
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking, is it a possibility that Ogden City could actually apply for a grant? And I'm curious.
I feel like that's a little bit of a conflict of interest where we're applying for our own grant funds that are supposed to be available to the community, but I don't.
I think I think the situation could someday
Yeah, we could
happen.
want
I guess
to
I'm just
do
trying
our
to see if we
project.
need to protect ourselves from that.
Yeah.
We're going to do some interpretive dancing for people. No, I'm kidding.
Like some murals in the chambers.
There have
Yeah.
been past
No.
administrations that
I
might
hear
have
you.
used that money for something. So I'm just saying,
That might be something we should add just in case, but I can
So you're
99% for sure tell you that probably wouldn't pass the first
And
round.
probably an employee couldn't. Yeah, an employee wouldn't be able to.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We've actually had employees ask if they
funnier
could apply,
things
and
have
we've told them no.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
And as a further clarification to your point, Councilmember White, sorry to try to, but please recognize that this does go through the Arts Grant Committee for recommendation, but at the end of the day, these grants go through your approval as a funding body. So please keep that in mind, that anything that comes forward through this process, you all will get the final approval on.
Lori?
I was.
Oh, sorry, you're in line.
Yeah, I'm
You're
in
next.
line, man.
Okay, just go down the row.
I just want to give Lori some relief.
Yes.
Remember that comment I made about how people are really passionate about wildlife, and we hear all about it.
Yeah,
We're really sorry.
it's okay.
I think it was last week, we just bought 7 dump trucks or something, garbage trucks
Five garbage trucks.
for a ton of money, right?
Yeah, that's true.
No one blinks at it. That's a huge amount of money. It's the right decision to make, but we didn't put Justin through the ringer like this. So we should.
Ben,
Sorry.
we could put art on those trucks
I
going
know.
down the street.
Put art on those trucks.
Again, to my point,
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be art grant funds. That would be public art money. Different.
Well, and I think there are genuine concerns from the community about some
My
of it.
memory
Yes.
is fleeting on that.
Yes.
But my point
Great,
is,
please.
we're not talking about very much money.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a lot of people who have a lot to offer in Ogden. And I think the best solution to all of the things that we've talked about is, one, continuing to go through the process, to continue to involve the committee on everything, but to continue to apologize to you for having to keep coming back, but also to, if we added more money, if we doubled the amount of money, or if we increased it by 50%, it's a orders of magnitude impact in the people that are applying for these. There'd be far fewer losers and a lot more winners. And it's a small amount of money in the bigger picture compared to some of the bigger expenses. So
Agreed.
we're sorry. We're only,
That's okay.
This only
I'm
happens to you
happy to
because
answer
we
your
love you so
question.
much.
I think
Just,
Councilmember Lopez has a
just another little clarifying and philosophical question.
Yes.
Why would a business submit grant petitions to do art in their business if it wasn't to benefit their business?
Well, so for example, I brought up Wasatch Coffee Roasting. They didn't actually do it in their business. They did it outside. And I don't know that they thought, I think they're participating in First Friday Art Stroll, and they saw a way to engage in the arts. And
But would that bring people to their business kind of around, right?
it brings people to the alleyway next to their business. It does. But
So there would potentially, we could say there could be a personal benefit to the business.
I guess, yes, there could be, but none of the grant funds were used, in any way to benefit the business
Sorry,
in that
Lori.
way. I was just saying,
They don't have to buy coffee.
they don't have to buy coffee. Like if
Right,
you've
right.
attended originally, most people go into the alley, watch the performance, and then continue on the stroll. They actually don't go inside. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know a lot of people that drink coffee at 8 p.m.
it's
at
a
night.
contribution to the city is what they're doing.
Yeah, they're contributing to the community and to the arts community.
Off the hook. We love her.
That's true. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments?
This is a 20-minute text amendment.
Some people seem to have a lot of questions and comments. Would you gentlemen have any questions or comments over here? Zero. Any other comments over here?
Thanks,
Okay,
Lori.
would anybody like to take any action? We've had public input.
Chair, I'll make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2020-4.
I second it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Nadolski, second by Councilmember Stevens to adopt the amendment. This is a roll call vote. I'm off duty.
Councilmember Nadolski,
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Vice Chair Blair,
Aye.
Chair Chaburka.
Aye. And that passes. Thank you. That was really sarcastic. I love that. Any public comments? This is an opportunity to address the council regarding any concerns or ideas, but realize for some reason we're getting really silly, and it's only 8:43.
No, it's not past 9.
Yeah, it's only
7:30, yeah.
8:43. So please come on up if you have any comments for us. I do not see anyone moving. Would you like to make any comments, Mayor?
Sure. If there's a theme for the night, I want to just put it on our employees. We've got some amazing people that do so much with so little. And I look at our arts and events crew as and kind of think of the phrase from the Marines, they're first in and last out. And that's the way they are with everything that they do. And there's a lot of dynamics that go into everything that you guys all do. And you need to know how much we appreciate you. I think you're amazing, and we appreciate the energy you bring to the community. So thank you all very much for your commitment and your passion.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just ask that Lori not go work for another city because of us. So. We really love the arts, and that's why we take so much interest. But as the sarcasm that came with the art battle tonight, we're sorry.
Don't see any other comments. Thank you all so very much. Please.
I did thank the other day publicly. I'm just so excited about this opportunity to bring international Mexican Hispanic folkloric dance group to Ogden. Potentially, we're close to making it happen, and I had the opportunity to thank the mayor and Mark for helping us. But I also want to thank now the staff here, Christy and whoever is helping you, hopefully Lori, because that is really I think it's going to be pretty kind of a historic event. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Would anybody like to motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. I'll adjourn.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's go.